Okay. So maybe I'll make the case for why I think what's happening in Gaza is morally indefensible. Hopefully, we don't have a disagreement on the actual facts on the ground. If we do, we'll get into that. But I want
Yeah.
to just explain Gaza how I see it, and then you could tell me why you think this is legitimate according to international law, unless I'm able to convince you that it's not. And
Okay.
I guess that would be my goal, you know. So first,
Yeah.
I kind of just want to start by explaining a little bit more about the ethos of the IDF and the current mindset in Israeli society. And I'm going to start just by reading quotes because I think these quotes by members of Knesset, as well as members of the War Cabinet, do help us understand the mindset the IDF is currently operating under. So we have Nissim Vaturi, who's deputy Knesset speaker, member of Likud. He said, "Wipe Gaza off the face of the earth." He goes, "Gaza must be burnt. There are no innocents there. We need to eliminate them." Okay, that sounds like genocidal language, in my opinion. Amichai Eliyahu, the heritage minister, also a member of Knesset, said there's no commands in Gaza and that using an atomic bomb was one of the possibilities. Smotrich, who's not only a member of Knesset, but he's part of the war cabinet, he goes, "In Gaza, there are 2 million Nazis." He then more recently said, "No one in the world will allow us to starve 2 million people, even though it might be justified and moral in order to free the hostages." We have Netanyahu, who's running the show, infamously referred to Palestinians as Amalek, and those are the people that ancient Israelites genocided according to the Old Testament. More recently, there was a leak that Times of Israel reported on in a war cabinet meeting. Netanyahu said that we're destroying more and more houses in Gaza, so they have nowhere to return to. Now, in terms of destroying homes and have nowhere to return to, this seems like a repeated pattern to try to make Gaza unlivable. On October 13th, 2023, 5 days after the horrific day of October 7th, Gila Gamliel, the Ministry of Intelligence, circulated a white paper calling for the forcible transfer of the civilian population to Rafah and then leading to mass deportation to 10 cities in northern Sinai, their eventual resettlement there, and the fortification of the Gaza-Egypt frontier so they may not return. A permanent relocation. This was a plan that was shared back days after October 7th. More recently, we saw that 22nd Battalion. So these are officials, and now I want to talk more about what actual IDF commanders and battalions are saying. The 22nd Battalion of the Carmeli Brigade, a video was published of them singing "May Your Village Burn" before entering Gaza. You could only think how these people are going to act when they we have Lieutenant Colonel David Cohen, who also recently said on video, "Everyone you encounter is an enemy. If you identify a figure, open fire, annihilate, and move on. Do not be confused in this regard." Recently, an IDF whistleblower said, when asked, "What would be the reaction from soldiers when they killed a civilian?" The soldier said, "I think a lot of them really feel like they did something good. I think the core of it, in their mind, these people aren't innocent." Now, this is corroborated. This idea that there are no innocents in Gaza is really corroborated by a recent poll put out by Hebrew University A-Court Center that shows 64% of Israelis believe that there are no innocents in Gaza. So, and I want to be clear because what I'm doing now really, I with all parts of the conversation, this is the part I struggle with the most because it requires me to essentially demonize my own people. And I want to make it clear, I have no hate in my heart for my fellow Israelis. These are my friends. These are my families. These are my loved ones. These are people who I spend time with day to day. And when you meet Israelis, they're some of the kindest, warmest people you'll ever meet. And humans are complex. We have this great capacity for love for those in our in group and a great capacity for hate for those in our out group. So I do want to make it clear that if you meet an Israeli, you're not going to get the impression that they're a hateful person, unless that is you talk to them about how they feel about Palestinians. And again, we could talk about how Israelis have been radicalized to this point. I think 100 years of conflict will do that to a population. But in order to understand what's happening in Gaza, we need to be honest about how Israelis view Palestinians. Now, considering the mindset of Israelis today and how they feel about Palestinians, we should be very concerned with sending in such a military to engage. The only thing I could think of that should make us feel a little bit more comfortable is if there's just a very high level of discipline and a system of accountability against war crimes. But neither of these really exist in Gaza. And, just some examples of how we know this to be the case. The IDF is by far the most revered institution in Israel. And holding soldiers accountable does come with social and political repercussions. The best example of this was the Sdei Teiman alleged gang rape incident where 7 soldiers were arrested. Subsequently, the prison where they were being held and the courthouse were raided by far-right Israelis, including a member of Knesset. This is for arrest for alleged gang rape. So we see that when soldiers are held accountable, there is a cost. In addition to that, we do see an abundance of IDF soldiers just uploading posts on social media of them committing war crimes. Perhaps relatively minor war crimes are what they're uploading, but they're uploading them carelessly, whether it's destroying medical equipment, destroying water infrastructure, mass looting, burning books, burning down homes, the whole lingerie scandal, which perhaps isn't a war crime, but it just shows a level of conduct. There's been videos and photos of them uploading of abusing prisoners, many of whom we then discover are not charged with any crime. And to think the courage you need to have to upload this, you need to know that there's not going to be repercussions, and you need to know that there's not going to be societal backlash. So we're seeing an abundance of this happening. And so far, with everything happening in Gaza, there's only been 5 people who have been charged with crimes, and these were 5 in this Day Tayman incident. And the only reason the IDF did anything about it is because a whistleblower came out and reported that it was happening, and a very courageous Israeli doctor came out and said that this is happening. So the IDF had to act. But most war crimes are not reported, they're not recorded, and nothing's done about them. So not only do you have a very angry and radical population in Gaza, you don't have a system of accountability. So if we knew nothing else about what's happening in Gaza, we could assume with a very high degree of certainty that there's going to be an abundance of war crimes just based on that alone. But let's look at the actions, because the actions we're seeing very much support everything said here. So there's really been a systematic destruction of water infrastructure, wells, desalination plants, water treatment facilities. This is not infrastructure that we could claim is militarized. This has a simple purpose of giving water to the population. The majority of cropland in Gaza has been destroyed. Currently, only 13 out of 36 hospitals in Gaza are operational as a result of lack of fuel, lack of supplies, lack of personnel, and lack of clean water. A lot of this is a result of not letting in aid for months at a time. And then the way we're setting up aid in a way where soldiers are using live fire to disperse crowds. At a time when we have record level of sick and injured in Gaza, we have a systematic and deliberate dismantling of the healthcare system. I don't see how anybody can justify this. There's a protocol called Where's Daddy that we know about from intelligence officer whistleblowers, that they essentially are killing not only combatants, but we have reports of this happening to people from Hamas's political bureau. They're killing them in their homes with their entire family. Could you imagine if Hamas were to kill members of Knesset in their homes with their family? That very clearly constitutes a grave war crime that nobody would be okay with. Another very harrowing report, and this we could say is not systematic, but on a unit level, but it does show a certain ethos. One unit was using a 70-something-year-old man as a human shield, sending him into multiple booby-trapped buildings. After a few hours of doing this, they released him, and then minutes later of being released, he was shot by another unit. The reason why this is significant is because it shows 2 war crimes by 2 units operating side by side. We have many reports of these no-go zones, which comprise of large swaths of Gaza where anyone's shot on sight. Whistleblowers telling us that it's permissible to kill 20 civilians for 1 low-ranking operative, 100 plus civilians for high-ranking operatives. These are levels of proportionality that I haven't found another instance of in the 21st century. And I'll wrap it up real quick, but I think this is, I think when people hear this, they're like, oh, they must be operating from purely a place of evil. They just want to harm as many Gazans as possible. But I could actually see a very clear military incentive to do this, a tactical reason. So I don't think you need to assume this is coming from a place of evil. But we've heard Netanyahu on many occasions say that he would like to relocate Gazans as of late. And we do know there's a white paper in October 2023. Well, the best way to relocate Gazans is to make Gaza unlivable and to make life in Gaza unbearable, so people will voluntarily leave. You could also justify harming civilians to such a large degree that causes Hamas to surrender. We know it's very hard to deal with them in their tunnel infrastructure. So if we cause enough collateral damage, maybe one day they'll surrender. And third, if point 1 and 2 don't work, at the very least, okay, we'll punish the civilian population as a deterrent, so something like October 7th never happens again. So I could see clear incentive for why Israel would want to do this from a tactical level. So it seems like there's intent. The actions on the ground match the intent, and I could see an incentive for them why they would want to do this. Why they would want to do it obviously doesn't make it moral or legal, but I understand the incentive. And I also think it's worth mentioning the toll this has taken. We're seeing the highest level of women and children violently killed out of any conflict since the Rwanda genocide. 80 to 90% of Gazans are currently homeless. Gaza is destroyed, and Hamas still controls 40% of Gaza, and they're able to carry out attacks in areas that the IDF controls. And we still have 50 hostages rotting in tunnels, and the ones we did get out were through negotiation. We only rescued 7 through military force. So, I'm okay if people don't want to, if people want to describe this as something other than genocide, but to think that this is a morally defensible action and that this is something that the world should be okay with, I just don't see any case at all. And one last thing, if I'm just to appeal to my fellow Israelis and fellow Jews, I know we feel like what we're doing in Gaza is somehow necessary to our survival, but I actually think it makes us less safe. I think very clearly Israel's actions in Gaza acts to a fuel to the fire that is anti-Semitism. It is making Jews around the world less safe, and it is causing Israel to be isolated internationally. And even more so, a world in which we can do this to a population and no one will step in to stop it, that is a world in which Jews are less safe. And also, I want us to reflect on if this is who we want to be and if this is how we want to act as a people. And Brian, with that, I'll give it